Hello everyone and welcome to a new Then Now Later update. For any new subscribers, any new viewers, this is basically the video where I talk about my recent reads, my recent movies that I've watched, discuss what I'm currently reading and what I plan to read in the future, or what movies I plan to watch in the future. So today let's just get started. This is the third installment. So we're just going to start off with the books that I've read so far. So the first book that I'm going to discuss is Caesar, Life of a Colossus by Adrian Goldsworthy. This is a huge biography of Julius Caesar. You can check out my sort of Ides of March video where I explained more about this book and what I really loved about it. Needless to say, all you need to know is that I really enjoyed this biography. It's the one nonfiction that I've really enjoyed so far. In recent time. I don't read a lot of nonfiction, but this one was excellent. Adrian Goldsworthy paints an excellent picture of Julius Caesar, and not only building up his image or building up this great picture of him with the facts that we do know, but also I think doing justice to him in a way, in the sense that he's not making any bold assertions on Caesar, his motives or his aims, just frankly just telling you about his life in a very clear and concise way. And yeah, this was highly entertaining, and if you're looking for a biography about Julius Caesar, I would recommend Life of a Colossus. This was an excellent read. So the next book that I read was Lady of Quality by Georgette Heyer. This one follows a young woman named Miss Annis Winchwood, and she is 29 years old, and she's basically considered a spinster, but this doesn't alarm her. Annis is the type of woman who values her independence and her freedom, and so she is living by herself in Bath with a maid and then a cousin for a companion. But then one day she ends up having this random 17-year-old heiress kind of just thrust upon her. She basically just takes her under her wing, much to the disappointment of her family members and her acquaintances. However, she ends up meeting this young woman's uncle, who happens to have a reputation as the rudest man in all of London, and there's like a spark that ends up going on between her and the uncle. This one was it was okay. It's definitely not a favorite Heyer. This only, I think, reaffirmed the fact that I just prefer my Heyers to be a bit more bombastic, a little bit more high adventure. These Old Shades, or even the Grand Sophie, Friday's Child for sure. No one or anything really stood out to me, like Annis or her love interest or any of the characters. None of them stood out and made me really fall in love with this novel. So yeah, I'm just gonna have to say that this is like one of the Heyers that I least like, but still entertaining. Soon after, I read Hamlet by William Shakespeare. After reading Julius Caesar, I just wanted to read more Shakespeare. I really enjoyed this one. I can see why it's a lot of people's favorites, why it's a lot of people's favorite tragedy from Shakespeare. I don't know, I wouldn't say that this usurped Julius Caesar as my favorite tragedy so far, but it is really good. I do love just the philosophical sort of discussions that this book brings about. It's just really fascinating. And definitely there are a lot of passages here, soliloquies that are really thought-provoking and definitely are ripe for discussion. There were parts that I do feel like it did drag a bit. I loved it whenever Hamlet was on the page, but then whenever he wasn't, I feel like it kind of just slowed down for me, or I wasn't enjoying it as much as when Hamlet is on the stage and having his moments of crisis basically. But yeah, I thought overall this was a fascinating and thought-provoking play, and I definitely see myself reading this in the future, or rereading it in the future. So yeah. After Hamlet, I picked up another book by Tom Holland, and that is Dynasty, The Rise and Fall of the House of Caesar. So this is the unofficial sequel to Rubicon, The Last Years of the Republic. And this you basically just carries on after the end of that book. So we're following, well, this starts off with the Ides of March, and following, the rise of Augustus, his, how he eventually became princeps, and then the more or less establishment of the emperor, and then his descendants, or like his heirs, and just seeing how they kind of assumed power in their own different ways, and how they expressed that power in their very unique ways, and just all the craziness that is involved with a lot of these characters, or a lot of these figures, for Caligula and Nero for sure. What I liked about Dynasty, and I think like Tom Holland's history books in general, at least from the two that I've read, he really does make it accessible. He explained the family, the genealogy, the lineage very well. It was very fluid. I had no problem, understanding who was related to who was the son of who was the daughter of who. So I really appreciate that. And he's able to condense this whole dynasty in like 400 something pages. And of course, it's a very general overlook, but I think he still manages, it still manages to be informative, like very, very informative and highly entertaining. The next book that I read is quite different, and it was sort of like a spontaneous book because I picked this up at Barnes & Noble, and that is The Door by Magda Szabó. This happens to be a Hungarian classic. I've never read any Hungarian lit before, so I know this was highly rated. I did check on Goodreads, but the summary was very intriguing because it's one of those stories where the meat of it is a relationship between two people. So we're following Magda, who happens to be a writer, very well educated. She's married to an academic, and it says here that she has an on-again, off-again relationship with Hungary's communist authorities. And it's basically her and her relationship with Emirates, who happens to be a peasant, illiterate, and then impassive, abrupt, and who happens to be her housekeeper. And, they're dynamic because despite being Magda's housekeeper, Emirates sort of has like this dominance in her life. And Magda ends up having sort of dependency on Emirates, and then, vice versa also. So I think Emirates is a fascinating literary character, and just one that you can't pin down. Like, you begrudgingly like her, but then at times she can also be very manipulative, like emotionally manipulative. And then you hear her story, how, she's quite scarred, mainly due to events within Hungary's, dark past and everything. Overall, I did enjoy it. I do have a feeling that if you are Hungarian, or maybe if you're very knowledgeable about, Hungarian history, I don't know, you might have a stronger connection to, or this might have had a larger impact on you compared to me, who's just like a complete stranger to everything that's going on in the book. But yeah, I think the relationship between Emirates and Magda is just fascinating, and yeah, one that I think I would revisit for sure. And so the last book I'm going to talk about, you may know if you watched my latest video, and that is Everything That Rises Must Converge by Flannery O'Connor. If you watched that video, I just raved about this book and on Flannery O'Connor, because I consider her a queen of short stories, because all these short stories are just amazing. All of them like packed a punch for me, and I don't know, there's just something powerful in her writing. I feel that a lot of people use the phrase, this author has a distinct voice. And maybe it could be overused a lot, but I think it really fits for Flannery O'Connor. I was shocked, I was amused, I was moved, and all from a short story collection. So that's how I know you got a really great author on your hands. I highly recommend this book. If you're unfamiliar with Flannery O'Connor, a lot of her stories take place in a setting that she was very familiar with, the American South, and she just ends up turning, the everyday backwater, southern setting into something majestic, something akin to, you know, revelatory. And yeah, like I said, it's just powerful fiction writing. And if you haven't read Anne O'Connor, I highly recommend that you do. Definitely check out her short stories first. And yeah, love this one. Love this one. So for the books that I'm currently reading, I'm actually in the middle of 3. So the first one that I started reading is The Bird Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro, which was on a TBR, I think like a few months ago. I am like halfway through, and I did manage to stop, but I do plan on continuing it. I am determined to finish this one. And then we have The Cormorant by Stephen Gregory. This is from Thrift Books, similar to Lady of Quality. This is a horror novella, and if you're unfamiliar with the story, we're basically following a young couple who have inherited this cottage in Wales. And, you know, they just got a baby, and they're very excited about this cottage because, you know, they always wanted to move away from the city and sort of like nestle down in the country. So inheriting a cottage is like the perfect thing. However, the relative that, you know, gave them or bequeathed them this cottage, there's a little caveat in his will. They only get to keep the cottage if they look after his pet cormorant, so a bird, basically a seabird. Like if you fail to take care of it, you lose the cottage. So, you know, the couple just begrudgingly agree to do so. However, things take a sinister turn when their baby son starts to develop like this weird connection with the bird, and they start to think that, you know, this bird, rather than, you know, anything good it happens to, it's more of a curse basically. So yeah, that's the whole basis of it. And then lastly, I am currently reading The Dreams in the Witch House by H.P. Lovecraft. I want to read more Lovecraft, and I'm this far in. I don't want to rush it, of course. I want to take my time with this collection. So yeah, The Dreams in the Witch House is just another set of his stories. One thing that I noticed is that the stories that I've encountered here happen to be very horror fantasy. If you decide reading Lovecraft, don't start with this collection. Definitely go for the Call of Cthulhu and other weird stories. But yeah, so far I am enjoying what I'm reading, and yeah, I can't wait to continue on. So with books that I plan on reading, this one technically is a current read. Anna Karenina I did in fact start, but I'm very ashamed of how far, you know, how little I got through it. So I'm just going to restart reading it. So yeah. And then I do want to read another Hardy. So people said it was either between Two in the Tower or The Woodlanders, and people have really suggested I read The Woodlanders. And this basically follows a love square. We're following, you know, 4 individuals. And this book takes place in, of course, Wessex, Thomas Hardy's Wessex, in Blackmore Vale. And we're following Giles, who is in love with a woman named Grace, but then she is also sort of charmed by this man named Edred. But then everything, like this whole love triangle, kind of goes sideways or is thrown out of whack when another young woman, Felice, shows up. So yeah, it's a tale of passions and, you know, desires, and I'm looking forward to reading another Hardy. I mean, I'm trying to pace myself, but I always just get a hankering for Hardy anyway. You may have noticed that when I was discussing the then portion, I didn't discuss any movies because frankly, I didn't watch any since my last Then Now Later update. So all I have to show you is the movie that I was supposed to watch, but I didn't, and that is Barry Lyndon. I really need to get to Barry Lyndon, and I'm hoping to do so. Hopefully I do get to this because yeah, I really do want to watch it. I hope it ends up being a favorite. So yeah, those are all the books that and, you know, the movie that I've to discuss on this Then Now Later update. Thank you everyone for watching, and stay tuned and maybe subscribe and like if you enjoy this content. See what shows up on my next Then Now Later update. We'll see if I manage to tackle my TBR or what I plan on reading and watching. That's always fun. So anyway, yeah, thank you once again, and I'll see you next time. Bye.